So with me is Dr. Joseph Hanlon, and he is a Mozambican specialist and probably the best person to ask these questions about this resurgence of violence in the northern parts of Mozambique. So, Professor, thank you so much for joining us today at NSN.
Okay, happy to be here.
So what factors are contributing to this recent escalation of violence?
Well, guerrilla wars go up and down, and this war has been going on for almost a decade, and they used the rainy season to regroup and then stopped during Ramadan, and then they started again. And although the Rwandan troops are controlling 2 districts, they seem to have pretty free movement in the rest of Cabo Delgado province.
So is the impending withdrawal of the SADC forces any reason for this?
I don't think so. The SADC forces have not been very effective. The Mozambican army is not very effective. The SADC forces are not very effective. Rwandan forces and Tanzanian forces are very effective. They have been doing very well.
Well, so can you explain to us why that region is important for people who might not know Africa and Southern Africa so well?
The reason it's important is because of minerals and especially natural gas. It's one of the largest natural gas reserves in Africa. And other minerals, like graphite, for instance, which is important for electric car batteries. But the problem is this is a resource curse province, and it's the poorest province in Mozambique. And local young people feel they're getting no benefit from a decade of resource development. And so they finally decided, well, if no one will create jobs for us, we'll have to do something else. And the something else has been an insurgency.
So can you explain to us the position of the Mozambican government? Are they in favor of the SADC forces, and there are also Rwandan forces?
The Rwandan forces were brought in specifically by President Nyusi, who negotiated that himself. The SADC forces were rather imposed on Mozambique by South Africa. Mozambique doesn't really like South Africa, and so they never wanted the SADC forces anyway, and they weren't very useful in any case. So they're not sorry to see them go. But the Rwandan forces are very important.
Oh, so they will be staying, but South Africa might not be so happy about that because they're not so keen on Rwanda.
Well, that's part of one of the reasons why the SADC forces are leaving, because their new mission is in Rwanda, and they said, okay, we are in Rwanda to fight against the M23 rebels who are supported by Rwanda, and we don't want to be in Mozambique where we're claiming Rwanda as an ally if we're going to fight against them in the DRC. And so they said, okay, we have to pull out of Mozambique so we can fight against Rwanda and the DRC.
So how will this conflict impact the plans of the 2 companies? It's the French company TotalEnergies and US ExxonMobil, who wanted to resume exploration of those gas fields in Mozambique.
Yeah. Well, it looks like they will go ahead because Rwanda will be able to protect the 2 districts that have the gas. And so this will be very much an enclave development with, military protection. And what happens is that the gas is offshore, but quite close to the coast. You pipe it to the coast, and then you compress it very hard into liquefied natural gas. And that gets shipped by giant tanker ships all over the world, particularly to Asia. And it does look like TotalEnergies and ExxonMobil feel that the Rwandan troops will protect them.
Oh, so they will actually start exploration now, because at some stage they said because of the conflict they will stop it.
Yeah. Well, they did stop 4 years ago. And so it's partly to organize the Rwandan forces, partly to change their own view, because originally they said they wouldn't want to continue unless the war stopped. But they've now changed their mind and said, well, we're happy to export the gas if you can protect us. And so that's what will happen.
So is that why this war matters to the West? Because of these companies that are involved in it?
Well, I'm not sure how much the West pays attention to this war, to be truthful. It had been important to the U.S. 5 or 6 years ago, because the U.S. was looking for enemies at the time. This is before the U.S. decided to start the Cold War again. And so they thought that an Islamic insurgency was, they wanted to make Islam the new enemy. Now, of course, it's Russia and China are the enemies. They don't really care much about Islam. So they were interested at the time. They're not very much interested now.
In Portugal, the former colony?
Well, there are 3 countries that have been trying to get troops into Mozambique: the United States, South Africa, and Portugal. Portugal's the former colonial power. The United States ran the proxy war against Mozambique, in which a million people died. And South Africa thinks of itself as the major African power. And all of them want troops in Mozambique, and Mozambique doesn't want troops. And that's the reason that they've made deals now with Rwanda and Tanzania, who are also much more effective troops and are also Kiswahili speaking, which makes a difference because that's one of the languages of Cabo Delgado.
So, well, I'm thinking of South Africa, and I've seen what one of the opposition leaders said. He said that they worried if South Africa withdraws from there, that ISIS might find routes into South Africa. Do you think that is an issue?
No, I think ISIS is using Mozambique for the publicity. I mean, the main support that they've given to the insurgents was to teach them better media skills. And so what you now see is that when an attack takes place, like the one in Macomia, it's broadcast on the ISIS website within hours. And so it allows ISIS to, in some sense, claim this as part of their empire. But, I mean, it isn't really. It's a very local war. I mean, the commanders are all local people from this part of Cabo Delgado. I mean, this is a very local insurgency.
So can you explain a little bit just the politics of Mozambique? There's a new leader for Frelimo that was elected. And, well, I saw also recently that a Russian diplomat just fell over and died.
Well, no one knows what happened to the Russian diplomat. I mean, he may have just died. He'd been there for quite some time. Frelimo was the liberation movement which won independence against Portugal 50 years ago. 25th of April was the 50th anniversary of the revolution in Portugal. And Frelimo has remained in power ever since. Now, the problem is that Frelimo is less popular than it used to be, and so they are distorting the elections, stealing the elections. The registration is still going on, but I work on the elections as well. And what we have seen so far is at least 1 million ghost voters. These are people who don't exist, but are registered on the voters roll, and which, of course, will be allowed to vote for Frelimo. So that is enough to make quite a difference to the election.
And this election is in October?
Yeah, 9th of October.
9th of October. And how does they fit into the global geopolitical movements at the moment? Are they still sort of more aligned to Russia and China?
No. I mean, they are aligned to international capital. And so the whole point is that Mozambique is becoming increasingly a colony again. A colony of a somewhat different structure, but a colony to international capital, so that the mining companies can do anything they want, so long as a lot of money goes to the Frelimo elite. So they've just bought. I mean, it's a colonization through corruption. They've just bought the leadership, and they can therefore do anything they want in Cabo Delgado or anywhere else.
So how do you think this conflict, is it going to drag on? Do you think what's going to happen to it?
I think conflict will drag on almost indefinitely. I do think the gas will go ahead, because I think they will use the Rwandans and the Tanzanians to build a security zone, kind of like the Iraq Green Zone. Mm-hmm. And I think this is what we're going to see. And the war will continue. I think the war will expand into the provinces to the south and the west, which is Nampula and Niassa. But I think the Frelimo elite is profiting from the war, is profiting from the minerals, is profiting from all of this, and they're perfectly happy for this to go on indefinitely.
So who will benefit by the gas eventually?
Well, the gas mostly will go to Asia, particularly Japan and probably China. But one of the gas companies involved also is Eni, which is Italian. Some of the gas will come to Britain. There's a global market in liquefied natural gas, and Britain imports substantial amounts of liquefied natural gas now, so it could well import from Mozambique.
So it will not benefit the people you were talking about who are really poor in that area?
No, none of this money goes to the local people. It goes to the Frelimo elite and to the resource companies.
So is that why some of them are joining ISIS, or are they not?
Well, they're not joining ISIS. I mean, what you have to think about is that this is a Muslim area. And so if you're looking for organization, it's around religion. Just as churches are Christian, you get Christian organization. I mean, Bolsonaro in Brazil was very much supported by right-wing Christians, for example. So this is a Muslim area. And what some of the militant preachers said is that Sharia law is a form of socialism, because Sharia law preaches equality, that we would share the wealth. So if Cabo Delgado had Sharia law, then young people would get a share of the money from the gas and from the rubies and from the graphite and so on. And so they are arguing that Islamic practices would benefit young people more than economically. I mean, this isn't very much arguing about how you define Islamic law or Sharia law, or are you Quranist or not? I mean, all sorts of other things come into this. But what you're looking for is, they say, is a law which would share the wealth. Now, what is interesting is when Frelimo ran its independence movement in the 1960s, they were saying exactly the same thing. And the message that the Islamists are promoting now is exactly the one that Frelimo promoted in the 1960s. And the war is in exactly the same place. The war has started in the same place in Cabo Delgado. That one of the towns that has the most fighting is a town called Chai, and that's where the first shots of the Liberation War were fired. So it's a new generation of young people with the same message that Frelimo had all those years ago.
To Joseph Hanlon, thank you so much for speaking to us and giving us those insights.
Okay, goodbye. Thank you.